3 nights ago, one of my roommates had a dream, and in this dream he was being trafficked. He's a big, muscular guy. He's huge. He towers over me and all the other housemates. And so he's not a guy that's used to being pushed around. But in this dream, as he was describing it to me, he was telling me about how he was being whipped, he was being gagged, he was being brutalized, abused. He woke up from this nightmare. Breathed a sigh of relief. It was just a dream. Because his living reality is not one of being trafficked, being abused in any way. The only time he's ever going to experience something that horrific is in his dreams. The reason I'm so excited to see so many people here, you guys actually came, and that's awesome. And the reason it's awesome, the reason I'm so encouraged to be with you today, is that for 27 million people around the globe, their day-to-day reality that they're living is being trafficked, abused, and gagged. And the only time they're ever going to experience freedom is in their dreams. And the reality is if we're going to actually achieve for them freedom, if we're going to make their dream a reality, we need to do it together. And so it can't just be 1 or 2 or 4 of us handing out things across campus, talking about these issues. We need to do this together. We can make their dream of freedom a reality. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I want to start off by talking about someone quite different than the type of person that Jonathan portrayed as someone looking at pornography. I want to tell you about a colleague of mine I had the privilege of working with just a couple of years ago. This colleague is one of my favorite people, so genuine. We can trust them with anything. Just an amazing, amazing person. One of those people that doesn't matter how bad things are going in the office, they still have a smile on their face. This person is a vegan, so they wouldn't even hurt a flea if they could help it. You know what I'm saying? They're one of the most progressive people. They don't just tolerate people's differences and orientations, they celebrate them. They're awesome. And if the person you have in your mind, as Jonathan was speaking about, these graphic, abusive types of pornography, these popular types of pornography, these normal types of pornography, is this like kind of sketchy white guy in his basement in front of a computer. The person I'm talking about is the opposite of all those things. It's a very pleasant young woman. She's awesome. It was amazing to work with her for the few months that she interned in the office. And because I do a lot of stuff on human trafficking, and these days it also has to do with fighting pornography, these issues came up, and we were talking about this, and she shared with me how she uses pornography. And it's not something that's spiraling out of control. It's not taking all of her time. But like most, I don't know, but most people on this campus, and a lot of people here, pornography is part of her life. She talked about some of the different types of pornography she looked at, and that type of thing, and it's the normal, popular stuff. Amazing person. And as we talked, it came to me that although I'm fighting this issue on an issue-based level, and it's easy to forget who the people are that are looking at this stuff, that it's regular people, in this case an amazing person. And so I'm not standing here in any way to point my finger at anybody. You see, my colleague had no idea that the stuff she was looking at was actually perpetuating human trafficking. And to this day, she doesn't believe me and she disagrees with me, and that's okay. And the presentation that I'm making to you in the next couple minutes is the same thing that we talked about in our office. So I've had the privilege of working on fighting human trafficking for the past 6 years at Parliament Hill. And when I began in this work, especially at Parliament Hill, it's all about what should be legal, what should be illegal, about human trafficking. We're not talking about pornography, human trafficking, and prostitution, all these types of things. I'm involved in those debates. And as I got to be working on this stuff and began working for one of my heroes on this issue, and I was living my dream, fighting human trafficking, it began to hit me that I was going about this in part the wrong way. And that's because the issue of human trafficking is not simply an issue of what's legal and illegal, but it's an issue of dollars and cents. Dollars and cents. As long as there's big dollars in human trafficking, it makes sense to continue it. And so if you were actually going to fight human trafficking, not just fight it, but actually end it, we had to look at where the money was coming from. How are these guys who are owning these women and selling them, stuff that all of you are against, where are they getting their money? And so we began trying to follow those trails of trying to find that stuff. And it's criminal activity, so it's very hard to track down. They're not submitting HST receipts or whatever people with business do. And so we're trying to track this stuff down and doing the academic research, serious research on this issue. And to my surprise, I didn't go out trying to find this. It led us to the issue of pornography and the type of pornography that my incredible colleague was, and I think still is, looking at. So first, let's cite this one. This is from the journal article called "The Internet and Sex Industry: Partners in Global Sexual Exploitation" from the Technology and Society journal. It was an article published in the year 2000, so that's 14 years ago. And it's an overview of where the porn industry is getting their money, where human traffickers are getting the money, and how they intersect. And what they found is that in the year 1978, which is before most of us, though not all, were born, most porn companies were criminal enterprises, and that and it gets into this whole thing. You can look it up yourself. You can read it through the University of Ottawa database, which is what I did, and it showed how most porn industry stuff was this criminal enterprise. At the same time, there weren't that many porn producers because in order to have the technology and the cameras and all those things, you had to have a certain amount of capital. So it was a few organized crime conglomerates that were doing this stuff. Now, fast forward, that remains the case until the year 1994, which by that point, most of us, though not all, sorry, Mark, were born. And so at that point, it becomes much more difficult to track where the money and who's controlling the sex industry and porn and all this stuff. And yet, by all the research that we can find, what was happening in 1978 is still true today, except even more so. Because in 1978, you needed to have a certain amount of money, you need to have the studios, and you need to have access to be able to print magazines and all those things. But in 1994, with the advent of the internet, all of a sudden now anybody can become a producer of porn and various other types of sex trafficking. So as far as we can tell, after 1994, and increasingly to this day, it's still the case, though harder to track, that those who are producing porn are not just your local person, entrepreneur with his whatever, a business with integrity, but rather it's people who are tied to crime. And so not only are those who are producing porn, but they're also people who are pimping out girls. The girls don't get to keep the money that they're being prostituted for. It's going to their pimp, and that pimp can sell them. It's all the stuff we talk about in human trafficking. Those are a lot of the people who are producing pornography. It's still tied to crime. What's the point of all this? Well, here's the point. If someone is looking at pornography, and okay, fine, it's like this. Thanks for your patience. On the internet, it's basic economics that the page views translate into money, okay? So you can be looking up on what you might think as a fairly tame website with pornography on it, and you're looking at stuff that you're comfortable looking at, but there's advertisements on the side, and there's different types of pornography that you draw the line. For some of you, it might be that you won't look at bestiality. Others, you won't look at child pornography. Others won't look at this. Here's the reality. The same people producing the type of pornography that you won't look at are very often the same people producing the type of pornography you will look at. And so if you're looking at those websites, if you're looking at those pages, if you're looking at those images, if you're looking at porn, then your views and your clicks on those images are translating into money for the same people that are producing stuff that you hate, that you would want to fight against. And so the reality is if you want to help end the pimping out of women, if you want to help end human trafficking, we need to stop giving money to the very people that we're trying to fight. And so the very people we're trying to go after with these laws about human trafficking are the very same people who are getting money from the porn views that people are giving them. And so we need to dry up their income and stop looking at porn. Now, one more word on economics before we move to our last point. And that is a journal article that I found called Porn Star, Stripper, Escort, an Economics and Sexual Dynamics in Sex Work, which came out in 2007 in the Journal of Homosexuality. And this is not a journal that is against porn. And they found that in terms of the type of income someone in pornography makes, unlike most fields of work that most of us are going to ever work in, the amount of money that you're going to be making, even if it's a tiny amount of money to start out with because you're being pimped, goes down from the moment you start. See, most of us were expecting after 6 months or a year, or depending on your job, maybe a very long time, are still expecting that we're going to have a review of our work and that they're going to give us a raise, even if that's 25 cents. But there's a reason that this journal, that again is not against it's not against porn, definitely pro-homosexuality, it's the Journal of Homosexuality. There's a reason that they found that the amount of money you make is going down. And that's because the work is brutal on the people that it's being done on. It's brutal. Your body is not able to be doing the things that you were able to do at first, from the very first time that you're being filmed. And so the people that are being, the people that if you're looking at porn, that you're looking at, are having their bodies traumatized. Even if it's stuff that they agree to. It's horrific for their bodies. That's the stuff that people are looking at, enjoying, jacking off to. And that needs to stop. It's destroying them. Now, we cannot talk about this stuff without sharing a few of the stories of the people in those images. And so I want to share with you the story of Jessica. She was someone just like a lot of us in university, struggling like a lot of us to pay her tuition. And so when she got an invitation to a job that was going to make some pretty good money, like most of us would do, she accepted it. So she drove off an hour to the porn studio where she was going to do a solo shoot. That's what she signed up for. And while she was there, she was pretty nervous, just like I'm pretty nervous right now giving this talk. And so they gave her a stiff drink, which I did not have. There's just water in my drink. And so they gave her a stiff drink to calm her nerves, and she took it gladly. And it calmed her. Boy, did it calm her. She blacked out. Well, a couple hours later, she had no idea how much longer later, she woke up. Her body was just brutalized. She was feeling so messed up, so gross, so dirty. There was the money they agreed to pay her was in her car. She was in her car, dressed. And so she went on home. Well, that was the beginning of her career, if you call it, not just in porn, but in human trafficking. From there, the people who had produced the images that she was in just took control of her life. Her life spiraled downhill, and they used everything they could to control her. They sold her to someone else, and she eventually ended up in Canada. Now, when she saw the porn that they made with her that day, when she was blacked out, what she saw was not a solo scene. What she saw was her own rape. Now, fast forward a whole bunch of years, 10 years later, she is now out of being trafficked. She had her freedom, and she was at an AA meeting where she was dealing with her addictions. And someone there, a fellow AA person, went up to her and was like, "Hey," and said her porn name. He's like, "Hey, it's so-and-so, I've seen you." And she was like, "Okay, cool." And he was talking a bit about, like, she said, "Man, like, you're beautiful. You made great porn. Are you still in that?" She's like, "No, I'm not in that." And then he referenced what she was wearing in that very scene that I described to you a moment ago, where she was raped. That's horrifying. Someone watching your own rape, someone enjoying that. But here's the thing. He had no idea. He had no way of knowing that what he was watching was her rape. And the reality is that these stories are so common. My being drawn to fight this issue of human trafficking and porn and to talk about it was not only as we followed the economics of human trafficking and saw its link to porn, but as we began hearing too many stories, story after story after story, of girls who are being trafficked, something you and I are all in agreement against, and hearing how, just like Jessica's story, it involved porn, and how that porn was not simply her doing things that she signed up for, but consistently being brought to do things that she was not wanting to do, whether it meant she was drugged to do it or they forced themselves on it, etc. Story after story of people being raped, it being filmed, and then regular people, like many of us in this room, watching it. And that has to stop. You'll remember that a few weeks ago, there was a girl from Duke University. I believe her porn name was BELLE KNOX, still is BELLE KNOX. And she went on CNN and a whole bunch of other news sites to talk about how porn is liberating, how she enjoys it, how it's good stuff. The inception of this event came while I was listening to that 4 weeks ago minus a day. It was a Friday. I was listening to her interview, and she was talking about how freeing it is, how empowering it is as a woman. And I was thinking of stories like Jessica's, thinking of people that I've met and had the privilege of working with, victims of human trafficking, thinking about their stories of being raped, it being filmed, and it being watched by regular people, by good people. And I felt so sick. I was walking home and I was thinking, what could we do about this? And I thought, you know what? I know that we're not going to win this issue by making things legal or illegal. We're going to win this issue as people like you and me choose not to watch those images. Images that you have no idea whether or not they're agreed to that or not, whether or not it's consensual or not. Images that in many cases are of people's rape. Now, I hoped as I walked home and thought about doing this event that we're now here doing today, I hoped that BELLE KNOX's career was going to be very different than Jessica's. I hoped that what she was saying for her sake was true, that she really found it empowering, that she never was forced to do anything. Now, Jonathan mentioned the scene that came I think it surfaced on the internet last week, where she was being choked and slapped. You actually see a tear coming down her face. And she was asked about it, and at first she said, "No, it's fine. It's just role-playing." But as she was interviewed a bit more, she actually admitted that she regretted that scene. And she regretted that scene. Well, I found something else written by her about all of this, and I'd like to read it to you today. This is what BELLE wrote, the same one that said it's empowering. No one is willing to consider the lives of the people behind the camera. No one wants to hear about the abuses and exploitation that takes place. No one wants to hear about the violence committed every day against sex workers. No one wants to consider that we have hopes and dreams. The reason I'm talking to you about this today is that we can make the dreams of young women and young men who are being filmed in pornography. We can make the dreams of people who are being filmed in those things and being raped for other people's pleasure and other people's profit. We can make their dreams of freedom a reality as people choose to stop looking at those images, stop giving money to the people that are producing that stuff, and choose freedom. Now, Jessica was asked recently about her career, about her experience being trafficked and brutalized in pornography, and the other work she did in the sex industry. And she said, you know what? Being prostituted was horrific, but it's done, and it's behind me. Being in a strip club was degrading, and I often was abused and even raped in that place, but that also is behind me. But the most horrific thing is the pornography, because I know it's still out there, and people without knowing it are still watching it, still enjoying my rape. You and I can make a difference. You and I can actually put an end to this stuff by taking away the money revenue of these people, by not giving them those views and those likes, those clicks. But you and I can also start to stand for the dignity of young women and men in these images by refusing to watch their rape. And you've no way to know whether or not they're raped, but based on the images themselves. The only way that you can make a difference on this is to stop looking at pornography. Thank you so much. It's my privilege to introduce the next speaker. One of our convictions in making an event like this is that we can really make a difference. And one of our fears in making an event like this is something called the bystander effect. The bystander effect is this: the more people at the scene of the crime, the less likely anyone will do anything about it. The less likely anyone will do anything about it. And so our fear is that in simply raising awareness about something and talking about a problem, it's going to earn people's sympathy. It will make people angry even, but it's not actually going to empower people to do anything about it. But the converse of the bystander effect is true too. The more who actually take action, the more others are likely to take action as well. So if you're at a scene of a crime and one person steps forward to intervene, it's statistically much more likely that others will follow their example and join. And so as we talked about what this event would look like, we talked about talking about how porn fuels rape culture, and then my talk talking about how porn fuels rape, how porn so often is rape.